In last video, we talked about hybrid identity. Okay, and in order to achieve hybrid mix of identities, we need some kind of sync for AD objects like users, groups, accounts, etc. And we need a means of authentication. Okay, that's what we went through in our last video. We have on-prem, we have cloud, and these users want to access the cloud applications as well. So to get the users in the cloud, we have synchronization established. Okay, and for authentication, we got three methods, and this part is taken care by AD Connect or Azure AD Connect that syncs the user objects to the cloud. And it also takes care of the authentication, but there are different ways. And in this video, we will talk about authentication. Hi, my name is Arun, and let's talk about authentication method in case of hybrid identities. So in order to save some time, I already created this diagram, which will help us to understand what is happening. Well, we know there are like three methods: password hash, sync, and pass-through authentication, and ADFS. That is Federation Integration Services. Okay. Now let's talk about this scenario that I have created. Let me go through this. There are users. Okay. This is our on-premises where we have the Active Directory to manage the on-prem application and identity objects. There is a AD Connect, which is synchronizing identities to the Azure AD. This is our cloud. And here we have our identities and cloud apps. Okay. And now the first method for authentication is ADFS, as it's seen here. All right. In this situation, what happens? So what we are doing, first of all, we are trying to understand these three different kind of authentication so that we would have a strong base. Okay. So in this situation, when ADFS is there, where the authentication happens. Okay, in that situation, if users go to access cloud apps, authentication happens on premises. Okay, once user try to access for the cloud applications, okay, it would send information to ADFS, and ADFS requires additional infrastructure. Okay, and so the additional cost is involved. All right. So in this scenario, authentication happens in the on-premises, though users has been synchronized to the Azure AD, but there is no password synchronization happens. Okay, so it means the passwords are still there in the on-premises. There are no passwords in the cloud. So for security reasons, you can say ADFS wins, but it requires additional infrastructure. We covered that part. Okay. So let's talk about some benefits of this situation. The very first thing is it helps us to establish hybrid identities. We have all the identities in the cloud. Okay, it very common example of using Office 365 with the same on-premises identities, and that's our cloud app. Okay, and if we are using ADFS, then it will allow you to display the password expiry notifications in the Office portal and the Windows 10 desktop. And it supports all on-premises account policies like expiry, hours logged in, etc. Okay, cool. Now, let's talk about what happens in case of password hash synchronization. Okay, so let me remove this and let me add here hash of passwords. So same scenario, what is happening, and of course the authentication part that we will discover. Now, along with the user identities, we have synced the hash of the passwords for security reasons. It's not like a plain text, it's the hash of hash. Okay, so that user doesn't need to authenticate on premises, and you do not require any extra infrastructure like we did in ADFS. In this scenario, since we have passwords available in Azure AD, so authentication happens where? In Azure AD or on cloud. So our symbol of authentication, this mark is, shows it will happen in the cloud. Okay, very good. Now, a little bit about password hash synchronization. The main benefit is you need not to spend money for additional infrastructure, and since the password is not syncing in plain text, it would be hash of hash, so you can establish the hybrid identity and the single sign-on. That is a big thing, single sign-on without any additional cost. Okay, and your users can access the, let's take the same example, Office 365, with the help of same user name and the password that they use for on-premises, because they exist in Azure AD now. And you can go for SSO, as I said. Now, there are some important considerations for password hash. Let's go through it. When compared to pass-through authentication, well, we'll talk about pass-through. PHS or password hash sync provides the how would I put it? It is like, for some of the security teams, keeping the password in the cloud is not safe. So pass-through authentication wins here, because in that scenario we don't save the password in the cloud. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the pass-through authentication, how it works and where the authentication happens. Okay. In case of password hash, we don't pass through, I'm sorry, PTA, pass through authentication. We don't sync the password, and PTA is a very special use case, and it's a awesome technology that they're using there, because here you get the benefit of both ADFS and authentication. Okay, I don't know where to put this mark because it uses both. Okay, so let me put it right here and we'll decide. Okay, all right, so what that means, when user tries to sign in, authentication happens in both places, in cloud and on premises. In this scenario, we still have the sync enabled for the user objects, but no sync for any password, no hash, nothing, only users. But we have this outbound tunnel. Okay, there is a outbound tunnel. There is a outbound tunnel like this. In case of PTA. All right. which takes care of authentication requests. So it's very secure. You don't need to sync your password in cloud. It is also secure because authentication doesn't directly require inbound access to your environment. Instead, PTA technology uses outbound tunnel, okay? But still authentication occurs at on-premises, okay? The thing is, when user goes put in their username and asks for password, there's an outbound tunnel or outbound request goes from PTA agent and it authenticates the user and password from the on-premises authentication uh, source or authority. Okay, cool. So these are the three different authentication method, and let's talk about a little bit about Azure AD Connect. Well, Azure AD Connect requires 2012 R2 or above server to install this agent, the very first thing. And it is not recommended to install this on your Active Directory or domain controller VM. And the second thing is it doesn't provide you the inbuilt high availability, means you can't run multiple AD Connect together, but you can still install AD Connect on another server in staging mode, which would not be syncing, but in case your primary goes down, you can use this one as so that you can say staging mode allows DR for Azure AD Connect. Okay, cannot use both simultaneously. You need to put the other server which is on stage mode. Sync would be disabled, and you can utilize it in case something happens to the primary one. All right, so we'll talk about AD Connect in a lot deeper while doing the lab. Well, this video is all about understanding these three authentication that we talked about in last video, and now I hope it clears the concept where the authentication happening, what is required, what is not. Okay, now let's review a little bit. Okay, so in case of ADFS, authentication happens at on premises and it requires additional infrastructure and money involved, of course, but it is secure as compared to password hash because your password is not moving to the cloud. In case of password hash synchronization, authentication happens in the cloud for cloud applications, of course, because the hash of password has been synced to the Azure AD. So Azure AD has both the information ID and password so that it can authenticate. In case of pass-through authentication, you don't need any other infrastructure. It is one of the greatest technology, I think, and it is more secure because still authentication is happening on premises, but there is no inbound access. There is always outbound tunnel from where the PTA agent goes and get the credentials to authenticate. Well, that's all about it. Well, thank you for watching this video. Let's meet in another. Bye-bye.